Eileen Gray was really one of the most intriguing designers of the interwar period in Europe, and she was an important proponent of the modernist movement in architecture and design. She was born in Ireland in 1878, but she grew up largely in London, where she was also one of the first female students at the Slade School of Art. In 1902, Eileen Gray went to Paris, and in fact in 1907 she bought an apartment there on 21 Rue Bonaparte. It was the apartment that she stayed in for the rest of her life until her death in 1976. In Paris she set up a gallery called Champ des Arts in 1922, where she sold her own designs, and that was designs for carpets, lights, furniture like chairs and screens. Nowadays her pieces of furniture sell at auction for record prices, and in 2009 the Dragon armchair sold for 23 million euros, and it remains still to this date the most expensive piece of 20th century design ever sold at auction. We have a number of objects of Eileen Gray's in the collection, and we also hold part of her archive in V&A's Archive for Art and Design. Except for drawings, we also hold 4 pieces of furniture, 2 screens and 2 armchairs. One could say that the furniture represents 2 quite distinct periods in her life as a designer. Before 1925, she was very fascinated by lacquer. She learned the craft of lacquering through a Japanese master lacquerer called Seiso Sugawara. And Eileen Gray worked with him for over 20 years in Paris. After 1925, she became increasingly interested in architecture, and she created designs for many buildings. She built 2 in the late 20s and early 30s, E1027 and Tom Papaya. Both are on the French Riviera, and both are houses that she made for herself. And these houses she furnished with her own furniture, and the 2 armchairs that we have in the collection were designed for those 2 specific projects. Women are often overlooked for their roles that they played within architecture and design, and Eileen Gray is no exception. Gray was not recognized for the work that she did for most parts of her life and for the biggest part of the 20th century. And in fact, it wasn't really until 1968, when there was an article published in Domus magazine, an Italian design magazine, that her work was highlighted again for a new audience and a new generation of designers and architects. In the Domus article from 1968, there is a photograph of an armchair on the terrace of Tom Papaya, and this is one of the chairs that the V&A now has in its collection. Eileen Gray never named the chair, but in literature it's often referred to as the S-bend chair or S-chair, as the structures that make up its base and armrest and back are each shaped like a letter S pushed on its side. These are held in place by metal bars. A padded canvas seat is then slung between the 2 S shapes, creating an informal armchair or an alternative take on a deck chair. Although it looks like a simple and straightforward design, it actually is quite complicated, and it has a hidden function because it folds in half for easy storage. What we think is that it's likely that Carol Hogben, who was the deputy keeper of the circulation department, actually saw the S-chair in the Domus article that we talked about from 1968. Because 2 years later, the chair appears in the Modern Chairs exhibition, which he curated for the V&A at the Whitechapel Gallery. It was then acquired a year later in August 1971, and it was by a direct gift from the maker, from Eileen Gray herself. Before this chair came to the V&A, it went through a drastic transformation. We know from looking at the details of the paint and the layers of the paint that in fact it was light grey and blue before, and the seat we can see from the photography from the 1930s that it was white or light grey. It's more like a prototype, and you can see details of screws and you can see that the paint isn't perfect. It was really a trial for her. She was trying something new. She was trying to come up with a new way of designing and using furniture. And I think this offers a really good insight into Eileen Gray's working process. Although the chair is designed in the 1930s and made in the 1930s, she still updated it and tweaked it throughout her life. So even 40 years later, she was thinking about how she could make it look different or better or function better.